Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Khofane. I'm Khofane Mudise, and today we'll be talking to the incredible Kenyan born and bred Carol Banks, as she'll be taking us through ethical leadership and how that is a compass for sustainable success for not just organizations, but for Africa as a whole. Hi, Carol.
Hi, my dear. How are you?
I'm great. We finally get to meet after
Finally,
Lord knows
all
how
the
long.
texts.
Before we even get started to the crux of the topic, can you just tell us about who you are and your background?
So, my name is Carol Banks in healthcare. I've been in healthcare now 20 years. I was just looking and I was like, oh my God, it's been 20 years. So, all the way from the bedside nursing to pharma industry, medical devices, and now in healthcare consulting. So, I currently support companies, organizations, governments, development partners, and donors to understand the African market. Also, I support people to just basically understand the environment in Africa and support African companies to do business better in healthcare.
I
In a
love
nutshell.
that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you are Kenyan bred. I mean, we're
Yes.
supposed to meet there, but
Yes.
you're like, you're doing so much traveling. You are never still.
Yes, yes, yes. Africa is big, you know. So I was born in Kenya, raised in Kenya, but I feel like I am called to Africa. So I will not settle until Africa, well, it might not become what I want it to become in my lifetime, but at least if I can build and lay some foundation, some bricks that the rest of the Africans who come after me can build on for Africa to become really
Yeah.
the great place that it's supposed to be.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, I think, yeah, it's such an interesting conversation on Africa, and I think we'll talk about it more,
Yeah.
especially given the topic that we have.
Absolutely.
So tell me this. You moved from healthcare
Yes.
to now consultancy. In the midst of your transitioning and evolution of Carol Banks,
Yeah.
what was your pivoting moment where you said it's time for me to write ethical leadership?
Oh, wow. So if you look at my journey, it's not been a straight line. And I never planned any of it, by the way. When I look back at my nursing school days and I meet some people who knew me when I was a student, then they find the person that I become today and they'll make comments like, oh, I always knew you're going to do something great. And I'm like, oh, very interesting because I never like set out to do anything outside of my bedside nursing. Circumstances led me to the place that I found myself. But then there are places I found myself and I was like, okay, now I want to know more. So transitioning from the bedside to the pharmaceutical industry was mostly because I had some difficulties in my first pregnancy and I couldn't function at night. And as a junior nurse, you work a lot at night. And I felt that I was not really optimally contributing to the patient outcomes, which is really the role I was supposed to be playing. And I stepped back and I said, you know what? I'm going to step out of this environment and I'll be right back because I loved and I still love nursing a lot. It's one of the areas that I feel like I gave everything I had because seeing somebody come in critically ill and then looking at them, you know, getting better and stepping out of that and going back to their lives, it really gave me a lot of satisfaction. So it really was a passion for me when I became a nurse. But when I realized that it was tricky for me to continue functioning in that environment, I stepped out. And with the hope of coming back, I'm not very sure though that I'll be able to get back. But I think I'll still be able to do some impactful work. And I am doing some impactful work with nurses every day. But I just feel like I never really set out a path to become the person I am today. And I feel that possibly is the reason I wanted to document something. So people would ask me, how did you come from being a registered nurse, actually practicing by the bedside of the patient, to becoming a general manager of a Fortune 500 company? And I almost couldn't piece everything together in one sitting.
Yeah.
And I remember when we did the top 40 under 40 in 2019, and Business Daily, one of the leading Kenyan newspapers, had an interview with me. And when they were done, they said, you know what, you really need to tell your story. But how do I tell my story? And I think that was the first place where I felt like I want to speak, I want to tell young people in Africa that it can be done, but I didn't know how. And I was like, that was one interview. And then I did a few other couple of interviews, but really you can never piece a story together. And my story might be inspiring, but it might not really be inspirational to somebody outside of my career path. So I wondered how I could share some of the pieces about my journey, but also what I think has worked for me. I read a lot, like I was telling you. I read so much. Anything Robin Sharma writes, I want to get my hands on it, and a few other authors that I read from. And I felt that they've given me so much inspiration, and they always pushed me to do what I thought I should do. And I felt like I had succeeded in some way. And I said, you know what, I'm going to put my story in the mix of what it really took, from resilience, from doing the right thing, from really pushing myself. And I felt that, maybe a book would be something that could help the next generation of African leaders. Yeah.
In the book itself, and in several interviews, you said leadership devoid of ethics is like a ship without a rudder. And in today's corporate world, particularly within Africa, and I do understand, Southern Africa is quite different from Western Africa, etc. But there are some similarities. What would you say are some ethical failures that you've seen, particularly in the corporate world, in Africa? And then the second level of the question being within African leadership amongst our presidents.
Right.
I said it whispering, I'm even scared to say it.
Scary. Yeah, so I think in corporate, what I've seen is that at times people become too consumed about making their career progressing, that they forget that an organization is not built for one person. And that's why we have a team. And functioning as a team is one of the key challenges I have seen in organizations. People trying to shine each other, people trying to take credit for other people's work. We have young, talented people. Instead of nurturing them, somebody wants to take credit for their achievements. And I think for me, I would like to see a corporate environment or organizations that really appreciate the role of every individual, from the youngest person joining the team to the highest level of the CEO or whoever the executive is. And why I say that is because we piece everything together to feed into the CEOs or to the executive. And without the small pieces from all those areas that sometimes might look like they are not as important in an organization, there can never be a success story of an organization or even the leaders of the organization. So I think what I see that is aiding our corporates is really sometimes we get so consumed in individual growth and individual progression that we forget that if we collectively do not have everybody feeling heard, taken care of, and really respected and valued as an employee, and that's where I see that's where the disconnect comes in, and the unfair competition at times where people are looking at, we are progressing, and when you're coming from the base, it's a big base, there are very many people. As you go to the next level, it becomes smaller, and the pyramid shapes in a way that there can only be a few people at the top. And so people get consumed from day one when they join an organization, and their eyes are on the top. And at times that can consume and really create a negative environment or a toxic environment that doesn't really speak into the overall goals of the organization. That's what I would say about corporate generally. Yeah.
And then when African leaders,
I think
where are we getting it wrong?
I feel like we lost it as a people. We've become extremely self-centered. And I worry that every time there's a change in leadership, people are not changing leaders so that the new incoming leaders can do something different. It's always like it's our opportunity now to eat. That's what I see. It's different. It's the same script. It's just the cast that's different. And they come and they continue to propagate. Most African leaders propagate exactly that which they saw as a negative or a weakness in the previous leadership. And they come in and they do either that or even worse. So my concern about African leadership is, why are we so self-centered? Why do we not think about our general population? Again, it's all about me. And traditionally, that's not who Africans are. And when I say we, from the reading I have done, I researched a lot about Africa when I was writing my book and how we ended up where we are today, all the way, the scramble for Africa, the divisions that came by. We were very communal and family oriented, but we become such individualistic people that we no longer think about, if I have it and my neighbor doesn't have it, how does that impact me? You understand?
Yeah.
If my children are in school and my neighbor, who actually is dependent on me, his children are not in school, we never think about how that will look like, because it is out of school today, but tomorrow this will be a grown-up. This will be a family that now is in poverty, and for them to survive, they'll start getting into vices like stealing. You keep hearing about all the insecurity. You keep hearing about all these things happening in our big cities. Why are they happening? Because we are so self-centered that we improve our livelihoods and that of our kin, but we don't think about the rest of the people. And that's why when you look at the poverty in Africa, really it's uncalled for. We shouldn't be poor. We shouldn't be living the kind of lives that we are living.
Yeah.
But if we continue to only think about our needs and not the needs of the society or the community that we live in, it's not going to end. And that's where I see our leadership is going wrong, because we shouldn't be thinking about fundraising for schools. I don't know if it happens in Botswana, but in Kenya we have charities just to take children.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm not talking about university. I'm talking about basic education, which is a human right. It's a basic human right. We have fundraising for hospital bills in the 21st century in Africa, where we have all the resources that we need. But guess what? They're with just a few people. And so for the rest of the people, we become like beggars in our own country. So I think for me, leadership in Africa, we don't think about healthcare for our people, our population. We don't think about education. If you don't think about these two things, you are setting up your population.
You're disempowering them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And for me, if I see a leadership that is not giving healthcare and education to its people.
I mean, this again, it amplifies when the U.S. government decided to cut off all African aid, or most of African aid. How our internal issues were strongly amplified. We may not have felt it as much in Botswana, but I know that in other African countries that were heavily dependent on aid, it was distraughtful. And I want to know from your opinion how ethical leadership plays a role here, because like you were saying, there's just so much selfishness.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine likes saying that in a country or in an area, in a company where they say there's no money, trust and believe there's someone who's living extremely well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And mentioning and talking about USAID and aid coming from America, it was about time. It was about time.
I want to say that any opinions said here are not of the host. They are of the guest exclusively, but I do understand.
I take responsibility.
Okay, yeah.
And the thing is, I think people in the industry have always known my sentiments.
Yeah.
When it comes to donor funding. I have always made it very clear that it's a shame for a country like Kenya to be dependent on donors to the level that we have been dependent. I will not sit here and tell you that President Trump did the right thing or did the wrong thing, but I'm going to tell you, there comes a time when we need to pull the rug from under the feet of some people. It was just about time, because we cannot be talking about corruption.
Oof.
We cannot be talking about corruption and then talking about aid at the same time. The thing is, it's like depending on your big brother as you do whatever you want. You're depending on your big brother. All you do is you're giving birth to all these children, but you know your big brother is going to support your children. At what point do you say, enough, now I'm going to become responsible and carry my weight? Or at least, can we see some level of responsibility checking in? Kenya is a low medium income country. What does that even mean? What's the meaning of low medium? What does that mean? We, by now, in 2025, the projections were that we should be funding our own primary health care. Are we now? I don't even want to answer that question. By now, we should be running even our own education. We should be running healthcare almost independently. Vaccines, we should be able to vaccinate our people. But as of now, we are still depending on donors. With USAID checking out, if you look at everybody and what the governments are saying, they are all saying HIV risk, malaria risk, and all this. But my question is, how long were we planning to continue depending on USAID and all these other donors for our HIV people, our HIV, malaria, TB vaccines? How long? See, people can talk about timing, we were not given notice, but with or without notice, nothing would have changed. So I feel that what happened, and by the way, I was affected 100%.
Yeah.
I had a very big project that was funded by the US government. It's still on hold. It's possibly not going to take off, or it possibly will take off. And I'm taking that hit because I'm an African living in Africa and preaching that Africa needs to do better. So I'm not here speaking because I work in the private sector and I'm not affected by the executive orders. I was affected. It actually affected me much more than I thought I would be affected. But I am happy because then we will sit down and think and do the right thing as a people, or so I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very complex and very sensitive issue.
Very.
However, it's our reality.
our
And the
reality.
question is, how do we move forward from here, from government level to corporate level to just your everyday civilians? How are they going to kind of progress from here on, as opposed to be completely reliant on aid? It's just crazy. And in the book as well, you talk about a lot about self-awareness as a leader. What blind spots does a leader need to look at before they become a quote-unquote toxic leader?
Again, it's the self-serving side of humanity. And we are all made in a way that, for example, let me give you an example. When you take a picture with somebody, maybe in a group, when you want to say the picture looks okay, what do you look at?
Me.
Thank you for your honesty. So, so have you ever wondered, before you posted a picture that you took with one person or a few people, have you ever stopped yourself to say, oh my God, I need to make sure that everybody looks good in this photo? Have you ever? Really, I think with age, I have become more self-aware. And I feel like age has a way, and this is not cliche, by the way. I used to hear 40-something-year-old women and 50-something-year-old women talking about age. And I was like, oh, well, they're consoling themselves because they're aging. But I actually appreciate what age does. It brings out a side of you that wants to think about other people much more. And like the photo thing, I became very conscious of how does everybody else around me look, especially when I started taking pictures with my teenage children. And my daughter would be like, Mom, you put this photo on your status. My friends are like, oh, Amy, look, you look this way and you look. They're not looking at you, Mom, they're looking at me. So please, before you post pictures where I appear, will you please check with me? And that got me thinking about how we live our lives. You look at something, as long as it serves you, it passes. But what about the other person? It sounds like a very small thing,
Sure.
but it's so deep.
Yeah.
It is that image of how you appear and how you're blinded to what about the other people who are in the photo with me. It's the same way we live our lives. We first live our lives based on what serves us, but we completely forget about the other person and how it impacts them. So for me, as a leader, always you have to be so self-aware that it's not always about you. I find leaders who keep their drivers and their workers waiting way beyond their meal times and everything. And I ask myself, is this leader really, really leading like a human being? And are they thinking about the other person? How do you keep somebody waiting in the car for you? They didn't have lunch because they don't know what time you will pop into the car. They didn't drink anything because they don't know what time. And for me, even just how you treat the people working for you,
Yeah.
it speaks volumes about the person that you are. So I think that leadership, small, big, we need to think about the other person, whether it's the people we employ or people working for us because they've been employed to work for us. I always start by asking myself, is this photo really just about me? Or is it about collectively everybody else involved? And the photo is just something I'm using in the place of an office, of an environment where you're the leader and everybody else is depending on you to provide direction. If it's all about you and where you want to go, then you lose everybody else.
Yeah, because in the grandest scheme of things, it's every decision we're making, is it for self-serving purposes or for the rest of the people? Now,
Absolutely.
for those who are in the receiving end
Yes.
of unethical leadership environments,
Yes.
how do they navigate that space? Because I know it's quite toxic. It's very difficult to kind of maneuver such spaces.
It's hard, it's difficult. But I always say that even the worst devil has somebody that is able to speak with them. So, for example, in a corporate environment where there could be like a feedback kind of a mechanism where I know that so and so has somebody's ear, and that person is, I don't know what to do with them. Instead of going directly to that person, I will go to the person who's got their ear. And I do know of leaders, top people in leadership, who some of their peers would be like, that one is my boy, or that, she listens to me. And I always find that a feedback mechanism, it's not always easy, but if you're in an organization that, first of all, you like, you find impactful, the work you're doing is impactful, the answer to a toxic environment is not to always up and leave. Unless you're looking at it and you're like, here, there's no way. So and so came, they tried, and they left.
Yeah.
Another person came and tried, and they left. At times, you're just dealing with a leader who is blind to their blind spots. They're blind to their weaknesses, they're blind to their style, which is so self-serving. And if there's somebody who's got their ear, and there's proper organizations always have a way of feedbacking up. I find it difficult when you're dealing with a family business, and maybe the owner of the business is also, has also family members working for him. So as an outsider, you might find it difficult to, give feedback and for it to be appreciated. But more and more, I see that even family businesses are becoming extremely professional in the way they run their businesses. So as far as corporate is concerned, I would make use of the channels, feedback channels, the HR office, some of the people who are close to the leader if it's in a work environment. Political environment also, there are always people who are...
Unless you've got a dictator and you're
Absolutely.
screwed, like your family
Absolutely.
is in danger. And
Yes,
that's it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel that at the end of the day, every leader is also a human being. They always have that human side that appeals to them to tone it down or to listen more. And I just feel like at times we give up too easily as a people. We throw our hands and say, you know what, we are doomed. Maybe the next time we elect somebody, we will be a little bit more, conscious of what it is that we do not like in a leader. And I feel like that's where Africa is heading. Well, at least for the Africa that I interact with mostly, I feel that young people are calling us back to order.
I think we saw that with South Africa,
In
Botswana,
Nairobi,
like it's
Kenya.
It's just crazy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And young Africans are saying, you know what? This is what our mothers thought was the right thing, and our fathers. But we are now here to tell you guys that no, this is not what we expect of our leaders. And I don't know if you heard about it in Kenya. There was this whole Gen Z movement where the young people took to the streets to demonstrate and to say, no,
Yeah.
this is not how we want.
Trended all over social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Kenyans, I love the freedom of expression that is in Kenya. The only thing we need to do is to take it to the next level where we make it like actionable and we get things done and not just talk. I felt that the Gen Zs were not just talking, but we the generations before them, we've kind of failed them because we did not handhold them and support them in what really they're trying to advocate for. But I feel like there's a change that's coming to Africa. And it's not a change because we older people have decided to change. No. We are being called to order by our children. I feel like my children call me back to order, and they call me out in a respectful way, but to remind me of the consequences of what I do and how that will affect not just them, but generations to come. And that's what the hope I have for Africa. Yeah, I'll do what it takes right now, but I know that beyond where I am, there's a lot of change that's coming in the young people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in conclusion, if there was a particular principle or ethical principle that every leader should abide by, in your opinion, what
Yes.
would it be?
It's doing the right thing even when nobody's watching.
Mm.
For me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You're making a decision that's going to affect 60 million people. Those 60 million people are not aware of the decisions that you make as a leader every day. I'm talking about a president, for example. I think for me, if you can do the right thing, where there's nobody holding you accountable, and you do it without anybody watching, any cameras for you to get applause, if you can do the right thing when nobody's watching, then for me, that is the pinnacle. That is like the top, the level of ethical leadership that I would say is a dream
Yeah.
to attain.
Wow, Carol, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you for another hour, honestly. But I think I've learned a lot, and I do hope other people do kind of grab your book. Where can they get it? The
The
ethical
book,
leadership.
also, the book is actually available in French and in English.
Oh.
It's on Amazon.
Oui, oui. Very fancy.
It's also available as an ebook on Amazon.
Cool.
The people who are in Kenya, the book is available on Nuria bookstore, and a couple of my friends still bully me to come and get it from me. So whichever one you prefer,
Yeah.
happy to make the book available.
So
I think we need to
brilliant.
bring the book to Botswana.
I think so, and we know who to talk to.
I
And that
know.
person knows themselves.
I'm telling you, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carol. I've learned so much, and just prior to us recording this episode, also, and I'm really grateful for your hospitality. Also, when I was in Kenya, and you were like in another part of the world, and I'm just so grateful for you being a champion for transformation within Africa, and I really appreciate that. And to your audience, thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.